All right, so we're up and running. Welcome to everybody who's going to be watching. Um, Let me just see if I can get these people on here. Demetrius,
Yes,
how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Very good, thanks. Um, can you hear me fine?
Yeah, no, I can hear you fine.
You're driving.
Yeah, well, I'm parked in. Yeah, because I just got me foods, but right now I'm parked in a parking lot.
Oh, you're going to be all right doing that from there?
Yeah, because right now I'm parked, so I'm fine.
Okay, good. We're looking at about an hour and a half for this. You okay with that?
Did Michael tell you that I have to be at work at 2:30?
How long is that from now?
Well, right now it's 1:15 for me.
All
So
right, so it gives us an hour.
yeah, I told him that we're cutting
Okay,
it
did you
close.
give him the did he give you the format of how we want to structure it?
Yes.
Okay, so you're good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, awesome. Just waiting for Mike to arrive. And I was going to try and get things set up this side. Um, all right, so what did we say? It was 20-minute openings each. 15, we said 15 rebuttals, didn't we?
Yeah, I think he said either. Yeah, I think it was either 15 or 10. I have to double check.
All right. Here's Mike now.
Hello.
Mike, how you doing?
Good.
Oh, I can see you're good. I can hear you fine. You see Demetrius is on.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Okay, guys, thanks for doing this.
Oh yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
So I think we just give it straight over to Demetrius, and then I think with seeing that you taking the affirmative, you should go first.
Okay. Me? Okay. Um, like the openings? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Demetrius, you're gonna check out for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
got a timer or something?
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the time right now.
Awesome.
Okay. So I just want to say that there was not millions of animals on the ark. There was like about 7,000 through 10,000. And the reason that is because there was Pangea before the flood. And Pangea and Genesis 7:11 says God basically broke. It says the water came from the fountains of the earth and also the sky. So God, that basically there's lots of water in the Earth's mantle, and they even like low estimates estimate that like about 50% of the water in the Earth's oceans is contained within the Earth's mantle. So God basically split up the Earth's mantle to cause the flood. And what that did is basically it caused the continents to split up. And also, Psalms 104, 6 through 9 says the flood formed the mountains. And you get mountains by tectonic plates smashing together. And I think that's also why we find fossils on top of mountains. Mount Everest has a marine limestone, which means at one point the tallest point on Earth was at the bottom of the ocean. Historically, we have rain records only go back less than 4,500 years, besides radiometric dating. We have 330 flood legends around the world with global flood accounts. the book of Job talks about cavemen in Job 30. Yeah, he does an entire chapter on cavemen, and that was like shortly after the flood. Because you read in the book of Job, he lived to be like 200 years old, which is like very good considering people before the flood lived to be super old. So he was around during that time. So I don't think cavemen are super old like evolutionists believe. I don't believe cavemen are 50,000 years old or the first humans. I think that like the book of Job says, they were basically crazy people that were kicked out from their society, and they were deemed crazy and evil, and that's why they went to go live in caves. Yeah, you never find cavemen with entire civilizations. They're usually like just small little families. What else? The yeah. Also, and basically with the Pangea and the animal thing, I was basically getting at that like since Pangea existed before the flood, there would have been a lot less species compared to 7 continents with different environments causing speciation. It's also important to note that before the flood, people lived longer and they were bigger. It says there were giants in those days, and the reason why there was giants is because whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, it's undeniable that you look at fossils like the megalodon or Titan boa and whatever, even like dragonflies, they're super big, even though they breathe through their skin. They're way bigger in the fossil record. They're called living fossils that are of animals that are alive today. They're just bigger and they live longer. So if you put a human on the same environment, it would be logical to conclude that they would also live longer and be bigger. A sauropod, at its massive size, like a Brachiosaurus, lived to be 200 years old, even though it was so massive. You're probably going to ask about carnivores on the flood in the Ark, but carnivores, there's probably a lot less carnivores than there is today. And the reason that is because I think it's Genesis 1:29 through 30. It says every animal is vegan before the fall. So basically when sin entered the world, death entered the world. Some animals started eating each other, but I don't think that there was as many carnivores back then as there is today. And just because something has sharp teeth doesn't automatically make it a carnivore either. Just like a panda can have sharp teeth. And if you found a panda fossilized and you've never seen that thing before, you would assume it's a meat eater or ate mostly meat. So that's why people lived longer and they were bigger back then. I also want to say that the Ark was not a ordinary fleet. And the reason being is because since people lived to be super old back then, it's likely that technology also progressed faster than you and I, because humans live now like 100 years max. But if we live to be 900 years old, technology would probably advance a lot faster. And we don't know if there was written records before the flood. To where people can communicate their ideas and nobody cared. It wasn't like work 80 years and then get a retirement. Yeah. I'm not going to say building the Ark was an easy fleet. It took 120 years. But I think with that amount of time, you can come up with a lot of things. And when I say technology advanced, I think it would be likely to say that it would be about as advanced as the Egyptians, just because people lived longer. Um, let's see what else. I think fossils are a very clear indicator of the flood. This is an entire like big thing, but like it's just like with the fact the fossils are bigger before the flood. I think that proves the biblical account that that things were bigger and they lived longer back then. There's also the fact that like you almost see like a exact percentage match with like all the fossils. So like 95% of fossils are sea creatures because 95% of the population of like animals are sea creatures, and then 5% are land animals. There's no like there's no like differences in percentages. It's like on the dot, exact. I also want to say that the first geologist ever, Nicholas Steno, he was a biblical creationist. He believed the flood formed the rock layers. Many of the geologic principles we have today come from his belief in the Bible and in a literal 6,000-year-old time scale. The idea that geology disproves the flood is completely wacko because basically what happened is that like in the 18th century, after Darwin released his like Origin of Species, a geologist got converted to it, and he basically he didn't like bother to disprove the flood. He thought it was like religious nonsense. Nowhere will you find in any of his any Haeckel's records. His name was Haeckel. Nowhere you will find in any of his records that he attempt to like disprove the flood or his religious counterparts.
10 minutes.
He simply ignored it. Yeah, and also in the beginning, he judged the earth and water. In the end, he's going to judge the earth and fire. And 2 Peter 3 through 8, it basically says that like for this they're willfully ignorant of that by the word of God the heavens were of old and the world that then was being overflowed perished with water. So I think this debate is very I find it interesting that atheists attack the flood more than any other event in the Bible. That's kind of like the thing to make fun of, even more so than Jesus' resurrection. And it's kind of weird to me, but the Bible basically says that like they deny the flood because the flood is evidence of God's judgment on the earth. God's going to judge the earth in fire in the end times, just like he judged the earth in water at the beginning. So, yeah, if you ask me, like, why would most scientists deny it? Why would scientists deny the flood? It would be because that right there. They don't want proof of the judgment of God. They don't want moral accountability because they're people, and they're waiting. They just don't want judgment of God. So, yeah. There's also the Ice Age. I think the flood matches very well with the Ice Age. Get a third of the earth covered in water. I mean, 30 of the earth covered in ice and snow. I think the water being left over from the flood would solve that problem. The book of Job makes like several references to snow as well. He says like he talks about snow in the north. He says out of the north comes the cold, and out of the south the wind chamber or something. He Book of Job just makes so many references to snow. So yeah. And also I want to say that like Pangea also offered double the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere and significantly less exposure to UV radiation. That's why that's why it was a better environment. Just the where it was located. This is like this is not even just a creationist saying this. This is even by like evolutionists that like Pangea. The reason you see big animals and why dinosaurs were able to grow the size they were was because Pangea offered double the amount of oxygen and less exposure to UV radiation, which means less birth defects, able to live longer, stuff like that. Yeah. There's also I'm thinking.
You got 5 minutes left, so you better think quick.
Fossils. There's like no I see very few. There's very few evidences of transitional fossils, and it's kind of like even Darwin acknowledged the lack of fossils in his day. And I don't think I'm not convinced that that's ever been changed. That's ever been disproven that there is a mass amount of transitional fossils. And I think that's evidence that like the flood went and killed everything off. It was just a worldwide extinction event that created those fossils. There's also the fact the dinosaurs. The book the Bible calls them dragons. The book of Psalms 74 chapter 74 verses 13 through 14. It says he slayed the heads of the dragons in the waters and crushed them back and forth. You know, what's also interesting too is the first T-Rex skeleton we found. Like the first fully formed T-Rex skeleton. That was in 2013. And what's interesting is that if dinosaurs did have wings, like if a T-Rex had wings, that'd be the first thing to go. And like its decomposition, you wouldn't be able to see it. I also think that's why we see giant reptiles in a lot of ancient cultures, because they are dinosaurs, dragons of the Bible. The book of Job mentions a sauropod in like Job 40 through verses 15 through 24. And although some people would like to say that that's a regular ox, the Bible says only he who makes it can bring him near a sword. So that animal's extinct. It's been killed by God. It's not an ox. Yeah. There's how much time do I have left?
You have 2 minutes.
Yeah. I also want to say that Noah can take baby animals. And that would require a lot less food than adult animals. Also, like today, the ark represented salvation, and a lot of times people don't want to hang into the ark that is Jesus now. Yeah. Before he goes and ends the world in fire. I think I've said most of the things I need to say. I think that everything proves. I think historically proves a young Earth, proves there was a global flood. I think scientifically, I think it makes sense that the flood formed the rock layers. The flood formed the fossils. I think, what is it? 90% of the geologic column is empty.
Time.
Okay.
All right. Guess I'm up.
Yep.
Can you hear me fine? Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you.
All right. All right. So thank you for that. I think you'll be surprised to hear that I'm not going to contest many of the things that you've said. I'm not a geologist. I'm not any kind of professional scientific person. I do know that a lot of the things that you just mentioned have been debunked several times by people that do know what they're talking about. But I'm not going to get into that. And the reason is quite simple. This debate is not about, is it feasible that the flood could have happened, but did the flood actually happen?
Yeah.
And to make my point, I'm only gonna raise 3 points, 3 issues. The first one is going to be previous cultures. I'm going to talk about the minimum viable population and the cheddar man. Now, to start off with the previous cultures. So when did the flood happen? Well, according to Bishop Ussher, he calculated the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat on the 5th of May, 1491 BC. Using the same biblical data, Answers in Genesis calculated the flood happened 2370 BC, and the Institute for Grace and Research settled on 2340 BC. The exact date is irrelevant. I'm happy to accept any of these dates for the point I want to make. Now, there were many cultures across the world, like the Chinese from the east, the Aborigines from the south, and the Mayans from the west. They all existed long before the flood. None of these civilizations had noticed that they were being exterminated, and they continue to exist unfazed even long after this deluge had subsided. So for the sake of time, I will only be focusing on one culture to press this point home, and that's the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptian pharaohs have an unbroken line from the 3rd dynasty lasting from 2650 BC through the 4th, the 5th, the 6th dynasties, from Snefru and Khufu around 2500 BC to Nechakare Sipta around 2150 BC. Now, although the flood would have fallen within these dates, so between the first ones I mentioned and the last ones, the pharaohs list does not end at any of the times that the flood was supposed to have happened. It goes on unbroken to the Ptolemies in the 2nd century BC and further. So if the global flood had wiped out all humans except for God's chosen 8, then the line wasn't even there wasn't even a pause in the line while one of Noah's sons became Egyptian and ascended to the leadership of an unpopulated Egypt. So how come the Egyptians never noticed the genocidal global flood? Well, probably because it never happened. The second point I want to bring up is the minimum viable population. Now, a minimum viable population is the lowest number of members of any species required for that species to flourish. The minimum viable population is used extensively in the field of conservation biology, where the main aim is avoiding extinction of species. The minimum viable population doesn't only hold true for animal species, but man as well. The long-term sustainability of a species depends on the species avoiding the erosion of genetic variability. Now, genetic variability is dramatically reduced by inbreeding. In other words, not enough genetic variation between mating couples and genetic drift. So those are the two important parts for genetic variability, is the inbreeding and the genetic drift. Now, genetic drift is the random changes in gene frequencies. Now, in 1980, Australian geneticist Ian Franklin and American biologist Michael Soleil created the 5500 rule. 50 individuals are the minimum required to combat inbreeding, and 500 individuals are the minimum to combat genetic drift. Remember, the inbreeding and genetic drift were the two important aspects to combat extinction. So the 5500 rule. Species with a high reproductive capabilities, like rats, can accommodate lower MVPs, the minimum viable population. But species with lower reproductive rates, like most mammals, including humans, require higher MVPs. So in a perfect world, 500 would be sufficient for humans to avoid extinction. But we're not living in a perfect world and have to contend with predators, diseases, and natural disasters culling the population. Ours would have to be significantly higher. So where does this leave us with the Noah story? Could our entire current Earth's population have descended from Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives? It's actually worse than that. It's not from 8 people, because the sons carry the DNA of Noah and his wife. So we're actually only talking about his 3 sons' wives and Noah and his wife. So we're actually only talking about 5 people. It's impossible. Not only would there not be enough genetic variance resulting from Noah's sons, but in turn, they received their DNA from Noah and his wife. My point being, Noah's 3 sons weren't genetically varied, but too similar to combat genetic drift. Even if there were 500 of them, any species beginning with fewer than 55, with fewer than the 5500 rule, face almost certain extinction. How much more ridiculous to believe we could have thrived from only 5. The third point I want to bring up is the Cheddar Man. So in 1903, a complete human skeleton was found in Gogh's Cave near the village of Cheddar in southwest England. He was dubbed the Cheddar Man. So using radiocarbon dating, he was found to be more than 10,000 years old, living in the Mesolithic period in the middle of the Stone Age. So they drilled a small hole into his skull and extracted some bone powder for DNA analysis. Surprisingly, according to a 1997 DNA experiment carried out by geneticists at Oxford, a living relative named Adrian Target was identified. So this man living 10,000 years ago has a living relative DNA connection living at the moment in roughly the same area, in the same country at least, in the same area, but just a couple of 100 miles apart. And they were even able to ascertain that the Adrian target was related to the Cheddar Man on his mother's side. So if Cheddar Man lived over 4,000 years before the global flood that wiped out all of mankind, how is it possible that he has a living relative bearing his DNA? If there had been a global flood, it would have ended that genetic line 6,000 years ago. Well, the answer is simple. There couldn't have been. There was no human extinction event triggered by a global flood. There's simply too much evidence to the contrary. All right, so if there was no global flood, where did the idea come from? Well, it was probably appropriated from an earlier Sumerian flood myth found on tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. In this flood myth, written about 300 years before Noah's account in Genesis, the gods became angry at mankind and decided to destroy them all with a global flood. One of the gods, Ea, warned Utnashtim to build a boat of about 200 feet by 200 feet and coat it with pitch. The boat was to have one door and one window. He was to load himself, his wife, his family, and the village craftsmen onto this boat. The flood would drown all mankind not on the boat. So Upnashtim gathered all the tame and wild animals that he could find to bring with him on the boat. So when the boat came to rest on Mount Nasir, he opened the hatch and released a dove, which returned as it couldn't find land. Next, he sent out a swallow, which also returned. Finally, he released a raven that didn't return. So Upnashtim released all the animals. Upnashtim was given a rainbow in the sky by the gods as a promise to never destroy mankind in a flood again. A lot of this story sounds very, very familiar to the Noah account. But that's not the worst of it. This Epic of Gilgamesh wasn't even the original. This was almost certainly a reworking of an earlier flood myth found in the Epic of Atrahasis, which was written almost 1,000 years earlier. In this version, the god Enki warns Atrahasis of the god Enlil's plans to destroy mankind with a global flood. He was instructed to build a boat with 3 decks and coat it with bitumen. Atrahasis brought his family and animals onto the boat, and the door was sealed. After the deluge, Atrahasis also released several birds before opening the door and releasing the remainder of the animals. Now, even this isn't the first of these stories. Sorry. The oldest known one is of King Ziasudra of Shurupak, who is told by the god Enki to build a boat because the world is to be drowned in a global flood. Ziasudra also takes on board his family and livestock to be the sole survivors of the deluge. So clearly the Noah story is not unique and based on one or several older myths. It's almost a certainty that the original event on which all these myths are based was probably a flood of epic proportions that occurred around the cities of Kish and Shurupak, somewhere between 2850 and 2950 BC, according to archaeological findings. So all 3 of these show that, well, all 3 of the first stories show that there was an unbroken line from pre-flood to post-flood, that it was impossible that anybody, that well, not anybody, that the entire Earth's population was wiped out. And the second one just shows, and the second half just shows how the Bible has taken on board a story that was a reworking of an earlier story, which was a reworking of an earlier story, which was a reworking of an earlier story, which was based on a global, on a localized flood, which I'm pretty sure, I mean, floods are devastating as it is. Even for very localized floods, for people who are involved in these floods, it is devastating. So I can imagine that people living in a very primitive time in an area with a very large floodplain, for that whole floodplain to be to be severely underwater would seem to be, for them at least, a global flood, because that is the extent of their whole world. All right, I'll see the rest of my time to you.
Where's Demetrius? Did you leave?
Looks like it. Our moderator didn't last very long.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to do your 15 rebuttal?
Nice cat. Okay. So you brought up earlier civilizations. I don't agree with any of that at all. You brought up the Chinese. The Chinese had one god before Buddhism. They had one god. His name was Shang Di. It just means creator. They sacrificed lambs to him. They knew who Yahweh was. I actually have an entire thing in my notes of the Chinese characters. They actually represent a lot of the biblical account. As far you say you wanted to focus on the Egyptians, Egyptian records are kind of whack even to Egyptologists because Mantheo, the guy who organized them all, that occurred in the 2nd century BC, and he tried to organize all the pharaohs and their like reigning periods, but he kind of did them in a way where he assumed that there couldn't have been more than one pharaoh at a certain time period. It's like assuming that America is 2,000 years old if you add up all the time periods of every senator that's ever had his time in office. So Egyptian records are kind of like out of place a little bit for especially even for the pyramids. You brought up genetic variation. That can be explained with Pangea. Okay, they had much better genetics back then because of Pangea. It had significantly less exposure to UV radiation and double the amount of oxygen. That's why. And then when they split, and then when now that there's 7 continents from the 5 people, there's a lot more genetic variation available just because there's 7 continents now. Also, let's see what else. You brought up that fact that like I'm wondering where you're getting your numbers for population on. Hi, Demetrius.
Oh, you can see me now?
Yeah.
Okay, because like I joined back. No, my phone had overheated, so it so it shut down. But it's
so yeah, I'm just wondering where you're getting your numbers for your population. Your population numbers. Like how many people do you think like would have been around in 2400 BC? Like where's your evidence for the population amounts? Like what actual written records for those? Also, you brought up like earlier flood accounts. I think you're I'm wondering where you're getting your numbers for those too. Where are you getting your written records for those earlier than the Epic of Gilgamesh and earlier than any of those things? Where are you getting those dates from? Did the accounts actually come with a written record attached to them, or is that radiocarbon dating? And also, I want to say that you're assuming that Moses is the first one in the Bible to mention Noah's flood. It was not Moses. It was actually Job. Job is the first book in the Bible. It's the oldest book in the Bible. Job was written in about 2000 BC, about the same time as Abraham. This is evidenced by the fact Job uses God's unique name El Shaddai, not Yahweh. But that because it's before Moses. He lived to be 200 plus years old, just like the biblical patriarchs. He also he mentions Noah's flood in Job 22, verses 15 through 18. He says, where wicked men have trod, their foundations were wiped away by a great flood. He mentions Noah's flood. He also mentions the fact humans came from dust of the earth. He says, like, he makes a reference to dust ye are, to dust we shall return. He refers to Satan as a serpent in the book of Job. So he's clearly aware of the entire he's clearly aware of the Genesis account. So yeah, and if Job was written in 2000 BC, that kind of trumps the Epic of Gilgamesh, because the Epic of Gilgamesh didn't, I think, finish being written until like 1200 something BC. Yeah, and the flood portion was the flood portion of the Epic of Gilgamesh wasn't written until a few centuries after 2000 BC. Also, just because you hear earlier flood accounts, it doesn't necessarily disprove it, because you have to prove that they would be able to hear about it even 20 mile. Yeah, you know, it's not like today where you have like open communication. A lot of people didn't hear about things more than 50 miles away from them. Can you demonstrate that Job or Moses would even be within range to hear about it within 50 miles? What else did you bring up? I'm sure you also brought up some other tribes. You brought up some other tribes. That were there before the flood, but they don't have written records, so I'm assuming that's just radiocarbon dating. And my response to radiocarbon dating in general is that if God can make the Adam and Eve old, why can't He just make the universe complete and it looks old, so it can function? That's my opinion. Why can't you just make the Earth look old by making it complete, just like it made Adam and Eve complete? Yeah. I think that also that the very again, I just want to reiterate this. The variation thing can be very easily solved because there's 7 continents now, not one, to get drop genetic variation from. That's you have to completely different foods, yet completely different exposure to melanin from the sun. You have just a lot of more genetic variations. And also, I find it kind of hypocritical that you're pointing out an incest flaw, because at some point you would need ape with, because apes have one more chromosomes than humans. So you would need an ape at some point to have one less chromosome than humans, to have the same amount of chromosome count as humans, right? So you would need them to find a mate. So the first humans would have had to started from 2 apes. That's not just a creationist thing.
Well, the time is up, because he gave you the rest of his time, and his time was supposed to go to 1:57.
Okay.
So now this is where you guys do the rebuttal.
That was the first rebuttal.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I want to take a look at some of the things that you said. The one that struck me sort of immediately was when you said there were fewer carnivores in the past, so having carnivores on the ark wouldn't be an issue. Do you think there were lions on the ark?
Yeah.
Tigers?
Yeah.
They're carnivores. They would need to eat meat.
Everything was vegan.
Everything was vegan.
Yeah, Genesis 1:29 through 30. Everything was vegan, including the birds, everything.
Snakes, what did they eat? They eat rats. I mean, the snakes cannot eat flowers or grasses or fruits.
That was before.
The Bible might say that. I mean, but we could have a debate about whether the Bible's accurate or not.
That's before the fall, not after the fall. After the fall,
What?
they could have been meat eaters, but before the fall, they were not.
Yeah, but didn't the arc happen after the fall?
Yeah,
Which means that they were carnivores after the fall.
I'm saying there's not as much. There probably wasn't as
Yeah,
much as today. I didn't
but
say there.
lions couldn't possibly have been vegetarians. Tigers couldn't possibly have been vegetarians.
Why are you assuming? Sorry, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
let you go through 15 minutes and then I'll talk.
No, to be honest, I'd rather have a conversation for my rebuttal. It'll make a.
Okay.
Lions cannot possibly be vegan.
Well,
System.
I think you're assuming that what the plant and nutritional value was back then. That it couldn't be sustainable enough for meat. Does that make sense? I think you're kind of assuming that like the same nutrients they need in modern day meat that they would that the plants wouldn't be sustainable back then as they are today.
Yeah, no, again, I'm no expert in lion evolution, but it doesn't make sense to me that lions were vegetarian at some point.
Well, again, you're assuming that plants have the same nutritional value as today, that they wouldn't be able to compensate enough for that.
All right. What I would like to take a look at here is you seem to be convinced that this boat actually happened. Is that right?
Yes.
There's a couple of problems with this which I'd like to explore. That way back in the day, there was no tradition of boat building of this magnitude. Boats of the time seldom exceeded 100 to 150 feet. And they were mostly just lashed together reeds covered in animal hides. Solid wooden construction was unheard of. In later years, shipbuilders had to go through years of apprenticeship to hone their craft to be able to build even a semi-decent wooden boat. And Noah would have no tradition, no evolution of shipbuilding, nothing to guide him along the process. He would have had to build not only the boat, he would have had to build a dry dock. He would have had to build scaffolding to collect the trees. He would have, you can't just cut down branches and build a boat.
Oh.
He has to fell decent-sized trees. They have to be cured and dried in a specific way.
That's why I said that like technology probably advanced faster than it did today because people live to be 800 years old.
Well, people didn't live to be 800 years old. You must remember right now we use a base 10 system for counting. That's a new advancement. Back in the day, they used a base 60, which was called the sexagesimal system, which was a whole lot more complicated. Our clocks and 360 degrees and those things are all built on, still come from this base 60 system that they used. It was incredibly complicated, and trying to, even today, when they try and convert these old numbers into the modern base 10 number system, most of them they can't do it effectively. So when people live to be 600 years old in those days, they didn't live to be 600 years old. You probably find when they did try and do calculations and conversions, they found that somebody like what's that guy's name that lived, the oldest man ever, Methuselah, who lived to like 1,000 years or something. He actually lived to about 80 years old. Now, that's impressive. For way back then, 80 is a massive. That's really doing well considering the average age was like 30.
Well, I don't agree with that because Moses literally he wrote down his age as 100, and then also so he
but he was using base 60.
He clearly knew what words to use to describe old age.
Correct, but he wasn't using base 10. He was using the base 60 system.
Yeah, but he knows what words to use. He knows what numbers to use because he used he used regular. Like he said, people lived like to be 50 before and whatever when it, so he knew that how to distinguish between the numbers, and so people don't get confused and think people live to be 900. So that was intentional. That was not an unintentional thing that just happens in mistranslations. And also, even in your own fossil record, Pangea and stuff, you see animals live longer. Sharks, great whites today, they live to be like about 60 through 70 years old. Megalodon live to be about 100. And that thing was 5 times bigger than that thing was like really big, much bigger than a great white. There's the Titan boa. That thing lived longer. It was way bigger than a regular boa constrictor. I think they found a dragonfly that was like a foot long. And what's interesting about bugs in general is they breathe through their skin. So that means that they would have had a much different environment in order to grow that big.
Agreed. But the people that lived way back then, we're not talking millions of years like in fossils. We're talking couple of thousand years ago.
That's why the Bible says you're willfully ignorant.
Yeah, okay. I don't really care what the Bible says until you can prove that the Bible is true. We can't lean on the Bible for actual evidence. We need to go outside the Bible to find what's true. And this is what we're trying to do now.
330 flood accounts.
So again,
no written record beyond radiometric dating. There's no written record of anyone living living before the flood. Even the Egyptian one you mentioned is flawed because Mantheo didn't order them correct. Made a massive assumption. And also, population numbers just don't match. Just don't match evolutionist accounts at all.
All right, let's take one step back. Let's just say for 1 minute I agreed with you that they lived very long and the ark took 120 years to build. One of the big problems they would have had is wood rot. So the first timbers that they put into the boat would have been in an advanced state of rotten decay by the time the later ones were installed. This isn't now you can't say the technology was advanced at Noah's stage. This is a very real concern to shipbuilders today. People who build wooden ships today know that when it takes a long time to build a ship, the first ones start rotting long before the last ones are even in. So 120 years makes no sense to build a boat.
How do you know it wasn't maintained?
With what? I'm talking about today. In our modern times, they still have a problem with rot on the first beams before the last ones go in. So they could treat it as much as they wanted to in primeval times, but it wouldn't have got around that problem. And another problem that we have with Noah and his boat is there's a lot of science involved in shipbuilding, which Noah couldn't have had access to. Shipbuilders today, they require a solid understanding of naval architecture using calculus, physics, mechanical and structural analysis. Noah had none of these things. There's no way he could have understood the stresses on a boat in severe weather conditions on high seas and anticipated the effects of yaw and roll and pitch on the vessel.
Well,
how would he solve the differential equations for bending moments and torque and shear stress?
God gave him the numbers. It literally says that.
God gave him the numbers.
Yeah. I'm not saying the flood was a regular. I'm not saying the flood was a natural event. It was a supernatural event, just like Jesus' resurrection. But it literally says God gave him the numbers. He didn't know that on his own. It says like God gave him the qubits and
God gave him the numbers to calculate to use the calculus to find the bending moment, the moments, and the shear stresses on the boat.
I'm sure God can articulate easier.
So you're saying God gave him all those figures.
Yep.
And God taught him how to do calculus and how to calculate the stresses and the bending moments.
I think you're kind of like assuming that like that waters would have been chaotic around Noah. Or that what?
Well, yes, everybody believes that. I mean, a deluge like that, to get the amount of rain falling and coming up through the bottom of the ground through the mantle to cover the entire earth over. I don't have the figures on me. I mean, the highest peak in the world was covered by a certain amount of.
I don't think God would flood it the same flood around him where the actual ark is the same way it would the rest of the world.
So you're saying that the whole world would be turbulent except around Noah's boat. God would make it peaceful.
It would be a little bit turbulent, but it wouldn't be like insane. It wouldn't be like insane where God's pouring out his wrath on everywhere else. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, let's go back to the boat building.
You keep trying to like say like the flood is a natural. I'm not saying the flood is a natural event. I'm saying it's a supernatural event.
I get it, but I mean, you cannot for 1 second think that the whole world was turbulent waters. I'm not just talking about turbulent like in your bathtub. This was chaotic. This was worse sea conditions than you've ever seen anywhere in the world ever, except around Noah's little boat.
Why do you say it's little?
Well, compared to the size of the world, it's little.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense. All right, let's getting back to the construction of the ark. Anytime that you want to shape wood, you need to bend wood. You need to heat it, steam heat it, and then bend it into the curved position. Now, are you saying that Noah had made this thing that makes it possible to steam massive beams, steam them and bend them into position and keep them in position till they cool?
What are you like? What are you using to like assume that like we live in the same? Another thing too is since Pangea existed before the flood, do you think it's possible that if Pangea existed before the flood, do you think it's possible that wood were wrought differently? Like the exposure to air would be different? That it wouldn't rot the same way?
I'm not even talking about the rot now. I'm talking about bending the wood to be able to shape it into the shape you need to form the boat. It's not like technology changed. It's not like to be able to bend wood and keep it in that shape, you have to steam it, hold it in position, and allow it to cool. Now we're talking massive members. Noah's boat wasn't made out of little 10-foot pieces of wood. These were massive members. The main members of the boat had to be one solid piece of wood from the front to the back, from bow to stern. They couldn't be joined. There was no way to join them successfully. So we're talking about massive members of wood that had to be steamed, bent, held in position until they cooled before they could be put on the boat. So are we saying that Noah made this massive steam apparatus that could bend this wood for them?
Are you like saying? I'm not really following what you're saying.
I'm saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's impossible. I'm saying that there's no way that Noah could form the wood into the shape he needed for the boat, because he couldn't do the steaming that was required on the wood. Sorry. It's simply impossible.
Wait.
The other thing is, the other thing is that God instructs Noah to cover the entire boat inside and outside with pitch,
I think you're kind of
or what
assuming
do you
the
call it, bitumen.
environmental conditions are the same today as they are back then. I think
Are you saying pitch was freely available everywhere back then?
Could have been. I think you're assuming though that also with the steel, also with the fire steel. I think
No, there's no steel.
The flaming thing. I think
The steaming.
Yeah, I think you're kind of assuming that he wouldn't have access to that just because the environment's the same as it was back then. I think you're assuming that.
Have you ever seen them steam wood to shape it?
No.
It's a massive operation. It's not something where you light a cigarette and blow a bit of smoke on it and then bend the wood. It's a massive operation. This wood has to be steamed for a long period of time. The wood has to absorb the steam, which breaks down the fibers. Then you can slowly bend it into position. Sorry?
That's probably why it took 120 years.
Yeah, because there's no ways he could have steamed and bent these massive members. I'm not talking about, like I said, I'm not talking about 10 pieces of the wood.
Do you think if he had enough manpower, he'd be able to do it?
Well, we know he didn't have enough manpower.
How do you know that? Noah was very wealthy. He had lots of animals. He would have been very very wealthy. He could have hired people to make it. Even if
okay. There's two problems with that. Firstly, we don't know that he was very wealthy.
If you have lots of animals, lots of resources.
Which Bible verse says he was wealthy?
That's how.
Which verse says he was wealthy?
That's how wealth was measured back then.
What
is animals and livestock?
All right, now, so even if he was wealthy, so again,
they didn't have coins back then. They measured wealth in like things you had and traded.
All right, which is the Bible verse that says he had lots of animals?
That they all did.
Who all did?
Most humans did.
So they were all wealthy.
Well, yeah. Most humans had like most humans had like they had a bunch of crops. They were all.
Then you just counted your own. Then you just counted your own argument, because if everybody's wealthy, then nobody needs to work. Then nobody needs to do something for money, or for more animals.
Well,
if I was a millionaire, I didn't need to work, and you were a millionaire, you wouldn't come work for me.
Well, I mean, like wealthy, like they had fruits and stuff, but like they still needed to buy it from each other. Like
So then we don't know that Noah was wealthy.
I think we do.
Well, you assume he was, but you don't know it.
You're assuming he isn't, though.
All right, let's assume he is wealthy and he pays people to come and build his boat. There's a couple of issues there. Firstly, he must have approached people and said to them, listen, God's going to flood this entire earth, the entire world.
You'll still take
every single person. Sorry?
You'll still take a crazy man's money. People will still take a crazy man's wealth.
No, I'm not talking about people think he's crazy. What I'm saying is, he's going to say to people, listen, you're all dead. You're all going to die. Only the people on this boat are going to survive. Help me build this boat. You're not coming on it. Help me build this boat. I'm going to pay you, which doesn't matter because you're going to be dead anyway. Help me build this boat. No one in their right mind is going to build that boat. Unless Noah lied.
They thought he was, they thought Noah was crazy. It says that. It says Noah was it says I forgot what verse. I think it's in one of the letters of Peter. He said Noah was a preacher and a herald of righteousness. So he was telling people that this is what's going to happen. Please enter the boat, and they weren't listening.
Yeah, that part I get. Yes, no, that I get, because if somebody came to me on the street and said God's going to destroy the entire world of the global flood, I'm also going to think he's nuts. My point is, did Noah lie to the people to get them to build his boat? In other words, did he say to them, you build my boat, you can come with me?
I think he did say that, and I think they just didn't believe him. I think they just thought he was wacko, and they just went on with their day and took his money. That's what I think.
So are you saying Noah lied to them?
I don't think Noah lied to them. I think they could have came on the ark. They just weren't. They just didn't listen. I think Noah invited them.
No, that's not possible, because the Bible clearly states that God only made provision for Noah and his family. They were the only righteous people. Not anybody who Noah wants to bring with. It was just for Noah and his family, because they were the only righteous people. So Noah couldn't decide to bring every boat builder with him.
Well, they would have to. Well, they would have to repent and agree to change their ways. That's for sure.
Where does it say that? Where does it say that?
Well, if the world had ever, well, that's just obvious. If the world had repented and changed their ways, there would have been no need for the flood.
So are you saying that Noah said to people,
Noah was saved
build my boat
because he didn't go along with the world. Noah was saved because he didn't go along with the world.
Yeah, look, that's a problem on its own, because there's no way the entire world, every single person on the planet, every single one was wicked and cruel, except this one man and his family, and his wife and his family.
His faith was accounted to him.
So we already know that Noah wasn't righteous, because he was an old drunk who eventually had sex with his daughters.
Yeah. Wait.
So he wasn't a righteous man.
Did you say Noah had sex with his daughters?
Yeah.
No. I think you're confusing Lot.
No, Noah also. I don't have the Bible verse on me, but I can send it to you.
He didn't have sex with his daughter. I think you're confusing Lot. Lot has sex with his daughters because they got him drunk. And
I'll send you the verse. But there's no conceivable way that the entire planet, every single person, was wicked, except this one person. That's
he had faith. It wasn't about your works. It was about the fact that he had faith. He didn't stray away. He was still trying to maintain his relationship with God.
Are you telling me he was the only person on the planet who tried to keep a relationship with God?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, there's no way anybody can believe that.
First brothers were Abel. Abel was a murderer. He killed his brother. Imagine what kind of influence that has on your offspring. Half the world's population were Cain's descendants, and then the Bible says also the sons of God married with the daughters of man. That's basically saying the sons of the sons of Seth were having kids with daughters of Cain.
What's that have to do with anything?
What?
What's that have to do with anything?
Well, I'm just saying that like the entire world, their bloodline was being perverted by this, because Cain's descendants were all immoral because they came from a murderer. They were all immoral. They were all murderers, like their father. There's
all the children were murderers.
Well, yeah. If you're raised, think about it today. Even today, you get raised in a tribal society, right? That like there's tribal societies that 8 people. That's normal.
All right. So what you're telling me is, if my father was a murderer, I'd be a murderer too.
If that was all you knew, and that was the entire society, and all society came from that guy, probably yeah, you might be a.
Then in that case, following your argument, Noah would have been as well.
No, Noah was the last pure one who wasn't.
Where did you get that from?
Where are you getting that he wasn't?
I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm saying that it's impossible that every single person on the earth was a murderer except this guy.
not just a murder. It's not just murderer. It's any sin. But but I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Noah was I'm not saying Noah was sinless. I'm saying Noah had faith. Noah wanted to keep his relationship with God. Noah wanted to be close with God. Noah didn't marry a descendant of Cain. He didn't associate with those. He didn't associate with those people.
So you're saying that? So are you saying Noah? You said Noah's daughter was the only one? What? No. Sorry, I missed that part.
I didn't say anything about Noah's daughter.
Or Noah's son. What did you say? Somebody didn't associate with somebody?
I'm saying no. I'm saying Noah didn't take he didn't take a Canaanite wife. He didn't take a descendant of Cain as a wife.
Are you saying he's the only one, or other people didn't take a descendant of Cain as well?
He's the only one.
How do you know that?
He's the only one that strayed away and kept living and kept believing in God and kept whatever.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
I need to look up a Bible verse real quick. I think I've seen one. Noah was a preacher for righteousness.
Which brings me to another point while you're looking it up. How can a loving God, I mean, aside from the fact that he could have just forgiven us or whatever, how can a loving God make everybody suffer so much? Couldn't he just caused a global heart attack? Everybody just drops dead. Or he could have just gone and everybody just disappeared. What's with all the cruelty? Why did he have to make everybody suffer? I thought it's a loving God.
There's a difference. There's love, and there's also God is love, but he's also merciful. God is love, but he's also God is love, but he's also holy. That's what I meant.
What does that mean? He's holy.
He wants to show us. He wants to show us forgiveness, but he's also holy, and like a good judge, he has to lay down the hammer sometimes. You know, you can have a judge that's a very kind person, but he's got to lay down the hammer at some point, otherwise.
So, okay, I know this is going off topic, but are you saying God is just?
Yes.
Are you saying God is merciful?
Yes.
That's impossible. Mercy is the suspension of justice. You cannot be both. You must be one or the other.
Well, that's the whole point of Jesus, is that he died on the cross for our sins, and he took what we deserve. So that's the justice, and so he can give us mercy.
Okay, it still makes no sense. So is God just?
Yes.
Is he merciful?
Yes.
After Jesus?
What do you mean?
I'm talking about today, after the time of Jesus. Is God just and merciful?
Yes.
It's impossible. You can't be both. You must be one or the other.
Not if someone pays you. Not if someone pays the punishment for your crime.
Then it's not just. If I commit a crime and somebody else pays for it, that's not justice because I got away with it.
Well, the thing is, though, is that it's God. God is everlasting. He's infinite.
What has that got to do with it?
Well, I'm just saying that, like, he can say, God is the judge, so he could say, I took that punishment.
Then there's no justice. See, this is the
Humans still
problem.
get punished on Earth.
God cannot be just and merciful. It's impossible. You've got to be one or the other.
Humans
So
still get
if
punished here on Earth, though.
so again,
You could still get punished here on Earth, though.
sure you can, but then that isn't mercy. That's justice.
Yeah, the mercy.
And I have no problem with justice. I have no problem with justice, but they don't call it mercy.
There's mercy.
So
There's
God,
mercy in the afterlife. There's justice here on Earth. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. That's the wages of sin. It's death. There's death, disease, punishment in the world. That is the wages of sin. However, in heaven, I don't get what I deserve. The punishment
we're not talking about.
was pretty certain.
We're not talking about heaven. We're talking about the flood. So, what was God just or merciful in the flood?
He was just and merciful. He spared the righteous one. He spared the one the godly, and didn't kill the godly with the ungodly.
So he was merciful just to. No, okay, no. This is a problem because he wasn't just and merciful to Joe Schmo that was busy being drowned in the water.
Because he didn't want to. Because he didn't put his faith. He didn't. He wasn't in God. He wasn't. He wasn't sacrificing animals for sins. He wasn't. You know. He wasn't a believer. He didn't. He didn't want to have a relationship with God. He kind of just wanted to do his own thing. That's why Joe Schmo died.
So God wasn't merciful with him.
No, because he didn't want mercy. He didn't ask for mercy.
All right. If I'm in a position to be merciful to somebody, that somebody doesn't have to ask me for it. I would automatically do it because that's my nature. So is it not God's nature to be merciful?
What do you mean you wouldn't have to have someone ask to do it?
Let's say somebody did something to me, whatever it is, and I wanted justice on them, or whatever. I want to take retribution. It's in my nature to be merciful. I wouldn't want to do anything to harm somebody else because that's my nature. That person wouldn't have to come to me and say to me, please be merciful, please be merciful. Because that's in my nature. I would automatically be merciful. Now,
sounds to me that you don't
have enough justice. Is it not God's nature to be merciful? See, this is where God has an ego problem because he has to be begged, he has to be asked, please be merciful. It's not in his nature to be merciful in of itself.
It's not an ego problem if you really are the best.
Sure it is. But it is a problem because does God need to be asked to be merciful, or is he merciful by nature?
You need to ask.
Then there's a problem with God, because if he's merciful by nature, then you wouldn't need to ask. You would want to do it automatically.
Your argument is, if God real, why do I have to apologize?
If what?
So your argument is, if God real, why do I have to apologize?
No.
My argument is, it sounds like you're saying that like God has an ego problem and I would just whatever, but God expects an apology. That's what I'm saying. It's not about God. It's not about God need to be asked for mercy. It's the fact that you need to apologize for what you've done. You need to take account of what you did. You need to take some responsibility and acknowledge what you did.
No, but you said you have to ask for mercy. For God to be merciful, you have to ask for it. Now, me as a mere mortal, you wouldn't have to ask me for mercy. I would give it automatically because that's my nature. No, that's what I'm trying to say. That's not God's nature.
I think we're I think we're using the wrong terms here. I don't think God requires us to ask for mercy. I think what he requires of us is to apologize and acknowledge the wrong things that we've done. That's what I'm saying. That God wants us to acknowledge the wrong things that we've done in order so we can be forgiven. Because the truth is, we're not.
Do you think when the rain started falling, and the people that when Noah went around saying, "Listen, yeah, God's going to drown us all because you did all these things." Do you think when the rain started falling, these people said, "Hang on a second, this Noah makes a good point. I'm going to be killed here," and start thinking, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I repent. I don't want to be killed. I'm so sorry for what I did." Could God have saved them?
What?
Which part? The whole thing or just the last bit?
I don't think anybody did that, though.
Really? You want to think that when the entire world's population started realizing that this is the end? I mean, even today, when an airplane falls out the sky or something happens, or people down in a mine and the mine collapses and they're stuck in there, these people suddenly pray like crazy. They pray to God. They ask forgiveness. They go out of their minds trying to make things right with God. You think you think the people in the flood didn't do that?
No. They were prideful and arrogant.
That's impossible.
No, just like with Satan.
That's absolutely impossible. In every scenario where people are facing death, absolutely, they're facing certain death. How many don't turn to God and say, "Please, I'm so sorry. Please take me. I'm begging for forgiveness. Please take me. Please forgive me. Please help me." This would have happened. Death. Sorry?
They knew they deserved death.
How? No, they didn't know they deserved death.
Yes, they did.
Everybody knows they deserve life.
You read in the book of the genealogies of Adam and Eve and all those genealogies, right? You read Lamech, descendants of Cain. He killed a man, and he went to report it to his wives. He was polygamous. He had two wives. He went and reported to his wives that he killed a man, and he said, he's like, if Cain is cursed 7 times for the one who kills him, then Lamech 77 times. He knew that he deserved it. They knew that they deserved judgment. They knew that they deserved death. But they did it anyway. And just like even with Satan himself, I think that if Satan said apologized and truly and repented of what he did, I think God would even forgive him. That's what I think.
But he didn't forgive all the millions of people drowning in the flood that asked for forgiveness.
They didn't ask for forgiveness. That's what I'm telling you.
None of them.
They knew what they did. They knew they were doing what's wrong, and they knew that they deserved death, and they did it anyway out of arrogance. They didn't want to apologize because of pride.
How do you know this? How do you know this?
That's just that was their attitude. Just like Lamech. That was the attitude. It was clearly Moses wrote that story in there because he knew. Moses wrote that story in there because he knew that he was displaying how prideful their children, Cain's descendants were. That attitude. They didn't care what they did was wrong. They did it anyway. They knew that they deserved death.
If even one person drowning in the flood turned to God and asked for forgiveness, just one, that defeats your entire argument. You cannot honestly sit and tell me that not one single person turned to God and said, "I'm sorry, forgive me."
Nope.
Okay. So then, so
Just like with
all right.
Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think a single one of them repented or thought what they did was wrong. I don't think they cared what they doing was wrong.
Every single person.
No. What do you think when Satan tempted Eve? What did he tempt her with? He said, "You shall become like God." That was it. That was his tempt, and she went for it. Then,
Assuming it actually happened, which we pretty much know it didn't.
But they're arrogant. That's my point. They did evil, even though they knew the consequences of it. They knew it would lead to death at some point, and they mocked God. They knew that would lead to death at some point. They didn't care. And what you're saying is that, like, oh, why didn't they just say it last minute? Well, that's not genuine. That's not a genuine sorrow.
Oh, it can be. Oh, it very definitely can be. You could have an absolute
that's only
revelation.
saying it to save yourself. That's not a genuine sorrow for the things you've done wrong. That's only doing it to save
could
yourself.
Be. It absolutely could be. You know, people could have this absolute epiphany and say, well, you know, their life flashes before their eyes, and they look at it and they go, wow, I was bad, and have an absolute revelation and turn to God and say, I'm really sorry, I messed up. Please help me.
I don't think God does that. I don't think God looks at it and goes, "Oh, you had all this chance to repent now, and you wanted to live your life and do your own thing, and then now you want to say whatever, and you knew the consequences of it, and now you want to say I don't think God accepts that. I don't believe in that.
Yeah, no, we all painfully aware God doesn't work like that. You know, God is God. You know, we all know what God is like.
Why should God do that? Why should God be like, oh, wow, you had all this time and you knew the consequences that this was going to lead to. You knew that this day was coming eventually. And then at the last minute, you go, well, It's like,
and if it was sincere,
at the last minute, it's like, it's a disrespect of someone's time. It's like if you had me like prep for something and then I decided to go it all at the last minute. It's disrespectful.
well, I find it very, very difficult to believe that it's impossible that people didn't see what was coming, understand that this Noah was telling this mad guy was telling the truth all along.
That's my point.
Huh?
They saw what was coming and they did it anyway. God requires you to change now. It's not just you can't just change on your deathbed and be like, oh wow, well now I realize what I did. Now I want to change just so I can go to heaven. I wanted to live my life and do my own thing. I knew the consequences that this was going to lead to, but I decided to do it anyway.
Yeah, it says you, but how do you know that somebody cannot have a? How do you know he cannot have an absolute revelation on his deathbed?
How would he have an absolute revelation on his deathbed? You mean
somebody could, on his deathbed, he could be lying there going, you know what? I really messed up. And he could actually, from deep within him, he could absolutely realize.
And I also want to know why you think the flood was a torturous event. Why do you think the flood was a torturous event? I know it wasn't instantaneous, like a heartbeat death, but like it wasn't like it wasn't like a super prolonged torturous event.
Well, we know that burning to death and drowning are two of the worst ways you can die. This is not even up for discussion. Those are two of the most torturous ways you can die. So it was a torturous event. Yes,
But they would have
that's a
been
good
swept
point.
away.
Huh?
They would have been swept away. They would have died. They would have died almost instantly. The waves would
No,
have.
they wouldn't.
Yeah, they would have. The
No,
waves.
drowning is not an instantaneous thing. It's a terrible way to die.
Waves
An
come in
absolute
hard
terrible.
enough in the currents and whatever. They come in hard enough that will kill you instantly.
But what about the people that were drowning around the boat? Because God made it nice
Bible
and
says
gentle.
the currents were so bad that it literally, in Psalms, like I said about the dinosaurs, the dragons, it says in the book of Psalms, 74, 13 through 14, he crushed the heads of the dragons in the waters. That's how strong the currents were.
What about the people right next to the boat? Because remember, it was nice and gentle around the boat.
Why do you assume
They
there was
drowned
people next to
horrifically.
the boat?
Huh?
Why do you assume there was people next to the boat?
Well, how did Noah evacuate the whole area before the deluge came down?
What do you
So
mean?
Noah said to the people, come build my boat, and when I'm ready to get on my boat and only I'm going to survive, all of you can run as far away as possible so that you die instantaneously. Yes,
I don't think they would have believed that they were going to die that day just because they saw rain.
Correct. So a lot of them would have been around the boat. I mean, they would have been knocking on the door when it was closed.
Only at the last minute, but by then Noah would have already been gone. Noah would have already packed up all his stuff and had everything ready to go. I imagine it wouldn't have been easy to open up. I imagine it wouldn't have been easy to just open up the ark.
No, it wouldn't have, because God sealed the door, remember?
Yeah.
It wasn't Noah that sealed the door, God did it. So it was magically.
You keep like pushing me into like this corner where you're expecting me to say explain the flood naturally. I'm not saying the flood was a natural event. I'm saying the flood is a supernatural event like Jesus' resurrection. I'm not saying the flood's a natural event. I'm not saying it was easy to build the ark.
But you're saying that every single person in the whole world died instantaneously by drowning.
Maybe not instantaneously, but they would have died in a few minutes.
A few minutes of drowning. Most people drown in a few minutes, and it's one of the most horrific ways to die. Nobody takes hours to drown. Everybody drowns in a few minutes, and those few minutes are horrific. This comment on screen is quite important. What did the animals do wrong? Why did the animals have to die?
Well, animals, God gave dominion to humans over the animals, right? So in order for humans God's promises remain true even if we disobey. They can get delayed, like with Abraham and Sarah. He slept with another woman, and the actual promised child of God got delayed for couple decades, but the actual child God wanted, Isaac, got delayed for a couple decades, but the promise still came true, even though Abraham and Hagar disobeyed God.
Are we getting to the animals?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that, like, in order for humans to remain on top of animals, animals have to die. They can't be perfect while the rest of humans are flawed and they just die.
Okay, that doesn't follow. That doesn't follow. Why do the animals have to die? I don't get that. That makes no sense. If every single person that disappeared off the earth today, would the animals be fine?
What?
If every single person on the earth right now, every single person disappeared, would the animals be okay? I'm not talking about the pets. I mean, my dogs would die of starvation, but the animals in general, would they be fine?
Yeah. Why?
Then there's no reason to kill the animals in the flood.
but humans are to have dominion over the animals. They can't have dominion over the animals if animals don't have an ability to die, and are just perfect and don't die, and they beat us in every way. If animals don't get diseases and whatever, like humans, we're not superior. We're not superior over animals. We can't take control over animals. But there still needs to be a punishment on humans for the sins that we've committed.
So because God made us better than animals, and he kills us, that means that because he's killed the better ones, the worst ones have to be killed as well.
Yes.
Is this God logic 101, or is this just...
No, I'm saying if you're in a classroom, right? And it's kind of like, it's similar to how one bad kid ruins it for everyone else. Ruins a privilege for everyone else.
Yeah.
The whole entire class, a lot of times the whole entire class gets punished, not just one.
But sometimes just the one gets punished.
I'm just saying, in order to hold everyone to a standard and make sure something like that doesn't happen again, everyone has to get punished. Not just one person.
But no, but sometimes just that one person needs to be punished, not the whole class.
Yeah, but if you have enough instances of someone abusing a privilege, the entire class goes down, not just one person, not just the people who did it. The teacher might just decide to ban it all and be like, you know what, I'm not dealing with this anymore. This is too much of a headache. And
okay. I don't know what classrooms you have over there, but over here they just punish the one that did the thing wrong.
If 5 students are on your phone, are on their phone, and it happens often when they're not supposed to be, the teacher might just say, you know what, no phone, for the entire class, because they don't want to deal with it.
Correct. Now, if just one kid is on the phone and the rest of the class is not, then the teacher doesn't say no phones. The teacher takes that one kid out and has a word with them.
But it's not just one person. In this case, it's multiple.
Well, no, we're talking about the animals. There's no need for God to kill the animals.
Well, we have to remain superior to the animals because that's what God's promise was, that we would have dominion over the animals. We have no dominion over the animals if the animals live and they don't go through pain and they don't die. There's no superiority over the animals if animals don't die.
So God makes animals, God makes people. He makes people superior to animals.
He gives us dominion.
These superior people make a mess of things. Then he has to kill the whole lot.
Yes.
Like I said, this God logic doesn't follow. Anyway, listen here. We've been at this for an hour 40. I think I would like very much if we could have another chat at some point again.
Okay.
If you're up for it.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at. I think we could get somewhere quite nicely if we do quite a few of these things and we could hash them out.
Okay. I think.
Is there anything? So again.
I think I'm also back to the flood thing. I think also the animals. I think also has something to do with the fact that it's just a display that God's wiping out the old world. Because those animals, they were all under the charge of those evil humans. I think it represents also that God is getting rid of the old world. Those animals.
But why didn't God just kill all the animals? Never mind build an ark. You just kill all the animals, and then just make new ones. Why Noah have to go find penguins in the Arctic and koalas in Australia.
Noah didn't find the animals. God gave him the animals. The
So
Bible literally says
the
God
penguins
brought
walked.
the animals to the ark.
So the penguins walked all the way across Pangaea from the Antarctic to reach the Middle East.
I don't think penguins existed back then. I think that came all after the flood, and then they all went into their different environments. I don't think kangaroos existed back then. I don't think even kangaroos existed back then.
Okay, so the only things that existed were the few animals that God put on his ark, or that Noah put on his ark.
Yes, because God took two of every kind.
Okay. Which again brings me to my point. Why didn't God just kill all the animals? Forget about the ark. Forget about this floating zoo. Just kill every single animal. And then when Noah gets off his boat, just create new animals. Wouldn't that be a more sensible way of doing it?
Why would that be more sensible?
Well, then Noah wouldn't have to build this big ass boat. He could just build a boat big enough just for his family for a year. And I mean, even that doesn't make sense. God could have just magically transported Noah and his family onto a high mountain, made the water come up to the ankles.
Well, yeah, you mentioned,
forget about the whole boat.
Yeah, this brings me back to the other thing. You mentioned Noah warning everyone, right? So that's why Noah was given 120 years to build the ark. He was warning people in that time period what was going to happen. It literally says God literally said, "You have humanity has 120 years to live. This is the time period you have to live and repent." They didn't do it, so God had him build the ark in the meantime to let him know, to basically say to everyone else, and make this big display that God's going to judge the earth and water, that God's serious.
Okay, so I'm not disputing for one moment that God was trying to warn people. Instead of making him build a boat, just say to him, listen here, you've got 120 years to walk around and tell everybody that I'm going to bring this flood and destroy the entire world. As a matter of fact, building a boat just slows you down. Don't worry about a boat. Just go out and just proselytize and just tell the entire world that I'm going to that on this day, at this time, there's going to be a deluge. And then once it's all done and God's now proven his point that nobody wants to be saved and everybody's pure evil, then a more logical way would be for God to magically transport Noah and his family onto a specially designed hut on the top of a mountain that's fully stocked with all the provisions he needs. Let the water rise up to their ankles, drown everything, kill the entire world. When the water subsides, create new animals. No need for a big ass boat.
God was having Noah demonstrate his faith
By building a boat.
Yeah. God was having Noah demonstrate his faith through the trials.
No, but Noah was already righteous. He didn't need to demonstrate his faith. He was already righteous. He was the only one.
What do you mean he didn't need to demonstrate his faith?
Well, he was already faithful. Otherwise, God would have killed him too.
Well, I disagree with that because, I'm saying that Noah was given trials to do that, and the reason we get trials in life in general is because even though God already knows that what we're gonna do, it helps build character. You might not not have the same amount of character as you had before the trial.
Yeah, but this isn't about building character. This is about God took the only righteous man on the entire planet. So he was already a faithful man. He didn't need to show his faith. Just skip the whole boat exercise and just put him on top of a mountain.
Oh, I don't think Noah wanted everyone to get flooded anyway. I think Noah wanted to warn people.
Yeah, so if he wasn't building a boat, if he wasn't wasting all his time building a boat, he could have had more time to warn people.
Well, again, that's where we get into a disagreement about how many people were helping building the ark.
No, I'm not talking about the people building the ark. I'm talking about Noah himself. If Noah had more time to walk around the streets warning people about this flood, instead of being actually building a boat or managing or whatever you're supervising, he would have had more time to warn people. This whole boat building exercise was a massive waste of time.
Well, they knew. Well, again, they knew that death would come. They knew that they may not have known the exact time it came, but they knew that they deserved death and God's judgment was going to come at some point. They knew that.
So everybody that Noah spoke to knew about it.
No, everyone knew about it. The entire earth knew about it. The entire earth knew that the entire world population knew that the judgment of God was going to come. They knew that judgment of God was going to come at some point. They didn't need to hear about a warning. They knew that they deserved death.
So people living hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles away from Noah also knew.
Why do you assume people lived that far away?
So people only lived in the area around Noah.
Maybe not around Noah, but like I don't think people lived thousands of miles away.
But they all lived within earshot of Noah's shouting.
I don't know the the Bible doesn't say the global population before the flood.
Well, if it did, we'd probably get it wrong.
What?
If it did say what it was, it would probably get it wrong. It gets everything else wrong.
I disagree. I think that's atheist.
Yeah, no, it was a cheap shot. Okay, so I think we're going to have to close this down.
Okay.
I'm really enjoying it. I've got to tell you, I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I really think we need to have some more.
Okay.
Is there any closing statement you want to make?
I just want to say that like Noah's flood, people don't want to hang on to the ark of salvation, which is Jesus today. And in the beginning, he judged the earth in water, and in the end, he's going to judge the earth in fire. And Bible says, "For this they were willfully ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the world that then was perished, being overflowed with water." And it says basically that people in the end times are going to attack the flood more than any other event, and try to disprove it, which I think is evident in this conversation. I've never seen an event in the Bible get more attacks than Noah's flood, even more so than Jesus' resurrection. Says the reason they deny the flood is because they don't want proof of the great judgment of God. Because God's coming back. God's going to judge the earth again. He's going to judge the earth in fire. And yeah, that's what I want to say.
Okay, cool. I think, firstly, that the reason why Noah's flood is the most attacked aspect of the Bible speaks for itself. I mean, it's the most ridiculous story out there. Anybody who wasn't indoctrinated into a religion and didn't already hear the story, if they were told this story offhand, if I told somebody who'd never heard the story before and wasn't indoctrinated into it, they would look at me like I had two heads. They would go, "Have you lost your mind?" Especially if I was trying to say to them, "This actually happened." People would look at me like I was insane.
In this world to confound the wise.
Anyway, the only other thing I want to say is thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you to the guys that were watching and posting comments. I did read all of them. I tried to put some of them up, but it was really nice having you guys here and seeing what you have to say, seeing the comments. let's do let's not do a debate again. Let's have a conversation again. I think this was the conversation aspect was a lot more call it useful than a full out debate.
Okay.
If you're up for it.
Okay.
You keen?
Yeah.
And let's try and do a couple of them, and we use different topics each time.
Okay.
And let's try and cover as much as we can.
Okay.
Cool. Mike, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Okay.
All right, guys.
I enjoyed your
Thanks a lot.
South African accent.
Most people don't understand it. Yeah. To you, I've got an accent. To me, you've got an accent. To me, everybody sounds like me. To you, everybody sounds like you. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, no, thanks. Let's do this again, and thanks again to everybody for, to the guys that did come to have a look, and hopefully in the next couple of ones that we do, we can attract a few more people that'll come and have a look at what we're doing.
Oh, I have a question. What time is it over there?
At the moment, 9:05 in the evening.
Damn.
That should be about midday your time.
It's 12 over here.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right.
And thanks a lot.
Okay.
Keep well, everybody.